What's up, everybody? This is Ed from This Day in Metal, and today it's my pleasure to be speaking with Colin Edwin, bassist for prog supergroup O.R.k. He was also formerly the longtime bassist in Porcupine Tree, has played in a number of other groups, collaborated with countless other artists, and released 4 solo records. But we're here today to discuss O.R.k's fifth studio album, Firehose of Falsehoods, due out March 21st through Kscope Music. What's up, Colin? Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
All right, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. I'd like to start with the title of the record. I know in the past that O.R.k album titles have had some kind of social significance. In that vein, what does Firehose of Falsehoods mean?
Well, the actual term itself, it's a propaganda technique that's it's attributed to the Russians. I don't know how true that is, but basically it's where something bad happens and they've got no interest in presenting you with the truth. You
Mhm.
just get like totally contradictory perspectives, you know. So, oh, there's a bomb gone off. Oh no, it wasn't a bomb. It was a gas thing. Oh no, it was a bomb. It was this people. Oh no, it wasn't a bomb. It was these people. And in the end, you actually have literally no idea what to believe. But it's a technique. It's a government technique, and I'm not singling out the Russians because everybody does it. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy nut, but there's a fascinating book I read a few years ago called Black Boomerang by a guy called Sefton Delmer, who was a very dark character. And he used a similar technique on the Germans in the Second World War. So there's a lot of fake. I mean, I don't want to sound like Donald Trump, but there's a lot of fake things going on around us. I mean, that's a fact. That's a fact that we're subjected to falsehoods all the time. And it occurred to me that really what we try and do as musicians is the exact opposite, because we try and express ourselves. We've got things that we want to express or things that we want to talk about, or it's cathartic in a sense, making music. You have to sort of get something out of you. So I suggested it to Lef. I said, what we're really doing is we're not doing any kind of falsehoods. We're just, take us or leave us. This is what we are. That's how we present
Mhm.
ourselves. It's how we've always presented ourselves. So, and I thought about it and we were joking. And one of the things was, Firehose of Sincerity doesn't have the same ring to it.
Not quite, not
So,
quite.
so let's pick that title and then, people can, people read their own things into music and titles, and that's what makes it powerful. But I just thought we'd put that title out there. It's quite catchy and it does reflect what's going on. There's no two ways about it.
I would agree with you there. It's kind of getting more and more difficult to know what is true, what's real, and what is, and I think, having listened to the album, I do think that what you guys are doing on these records progressively, as now this is your fifth, I do think that there is some real sincerity and integrity to the music that you're producing. Along those lines, I know that you've been slowly releasing singles from the album. I think it's up to 5 now ahead of its release.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
16,000 Days was the last one. You also had Blast of Silence. Um, for lack of a better term, Pick Up the Phone. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna use the full title that I inferred.
Okay.
Um, The Other Side and Mask Becomes the Face. I know that a good amount of the songs are out there already. But what can everyone expect once the full album's released? And how do you feel that this effort builds on your existing catalog with O.R.k?
Well, it's probably more focused than the previous records, and I think maybe the music generally hangs together. I've got a slight issue in my mind because on the CD version we have a very long bonus track.
Dive in,
Um,
correct?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah,
Mhm.
and actually, we tried really hard to make that work with a vinyl.
Uh-huh.
Um, we just couldn't do it. So, and it's kind of stands out. It stands out as being something a bit different, but it also hangs together with everything else in a way. So, that was kind of a format issue. So I like to think of the vinyl as like the statement.
Uh-huh.
That's the ultimate thing for me because I grew up with vinyl. I love vinyl as an experience.
Me
It's
too.
something that, yeah, it's something that's different, isn't it? It's like you've got the sleeve, you've got the sleeve notes, you've got the whole experience, the artwork. It's much more, it's an experiential way of listening to music in a way. Um, but having said that, we just couldn't do a double album. It wasn't viable, a double vinyl. So we thought, well, we didn't want that track to be left off. Let's make it part of the album, but it's going to have to be the digital CD. It wasn't a cynical move. It was just a genuine sort of
Mhm.
thing, you know.
Logistical
But
issue.
yeah, it was basically, yeah, exactly, a logistical issue. So I think what we've managed to do with this record is combine all our experience in the past, and we've always tried to make it as if we're in the room, you know, with as much care as we put into making the record expansive and you know, sonically interesting. At the heart of it all, there's a lot of live, you know, playing going on, even
Hmm.
if we're not actually playing, even if we didn't record it like that. It's our intention to create it as a sort of, you know, as our sound, if you like. And for me, all the best bands have that kind of identifiable quality. You've got your own sound and you're building on that. And I just think we're getting closer, you know, and more identifiable with each release.
Yeah, you talk about the writing process too. Like what's that like with everybody being kind of spread out, right? I mean, you got Carmelo and Lef that are in Italy, you're in the UK, and Pat's in the States, right? So how do you
Yeah.
come up with like are you doing all of it digitally where someone's sending pieces here and there like, hey, I had an idea for a riff here, is that kind of how it goes?
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, and that's logistics as well. We do have to
Yeah.
record separately, but there's always something at the beginning that often is, you know, I go to Bologna quite frequently to meet up with Lef and Carmelo. I mean, they're quite close to each other. They can get together quite easily.
Hmm.
And there's been a few times, you know, when I've gone over and we've had a writing session to kick some ideas off, and then usually that goes to Pat. Pat will then input, you know, his parts or some ideas, and then it'll go back to us, and then we kind of rinse and repeat, you know, and go around the cycle until we've got something we're all happy with. But yeah, at the heart of it all is the fact that we've all played together a lot. We're very used to each other. We're very comfortable, and we tend to sort of see eye to eye on stuff. So that doesn't make the remote process feel difficult in any way. It sounds a bit cold to people when you say, "Oh, we're all in different countries," but to be honest, I'm kind of used to it, you know. And from my perspective, playing the bass, you know, and mostly doing bass and a few sonic things and stuff, it's it doesn't make any difference to me if I plug my bass into a very expensive console in a studio somewhere, or if I go into my direct into. I've got some quite good setup, you know, just in my own place. So, and I've got the luxury of trying, you know, three, four different basses on a track, or
Hmm.
completely going somewhere random, and then, you know, even if I end up back where I started from, that's quite. I'm quite okay to do that, really, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that does allow you a bit more flexibility, I would say. But so everyone in the band is bringing like riffs, lyrics, ideas to the table and kind of seeing what goes?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to talk up Carmelo a little bit here because he doesn't
Okay.
seem to get so much attention, but he's a fabulous guitar player. He's really a big part of the sound. He tends not to do too many interviews because his English is kind of limited.
Okay.
Um, So, you know, he tends to get pushed aside. And most of the time when we talk about the music, you know, people come to me or Pat or Lef, you know.
Mm,
But Carmelo's
mm,
got a very, very unusual style. His sound is really integral to what we do, and his approach to the guitar, his chord voicings, his kind of odd time things that are completely natural to him. He's got this very unusual blend of influences. So that's always been that was an appeal to me when I first got involved. Was I knew Lef, and Lef had said to me, you know, oh, there's this really interesting guitar player I know. I think we could do something together. And I'm thinking, okay, another guitar player, you know. But you know, here we go. But of course, I was completely wrong about that. Straight away, I could hear that he had his own thing going on. He's got a very unique sound with a lot of character.
mm,
Um, he's one of these guys that doesn't play. He doesn't play regular lead or regular rhythm guitar. He does a kind of funny blend of the two. And I always think of if you think about a lot of the post-punk type guitar
uh-huh.
players, you know, they would have this thing where they would do like John McGeoch from the Banshees and Public Image and stuff. He didn't really play lead, but he didn't really play rhythm. He played melodic kind of rhythm guitar. It's all kind of one thing. Or, you know, the late great Geordie Walker, for example, fantastic riffs but you know, no solos whatsoever, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So Carmelo's got that kind of element, but it comes more from I think his folk Sicilian background, you know, probably hearing folk music and stuff. You know, I think it comes from there really. He's a one-off, really, completely.
Hmm.
But yeah, everybody has their own input. Pat's very inventive with all his rhythmic stuff and with all his drumming. He's full of ideas. He's super creative, and he's never stopped coming
Yeah.
out with stuff. He's always doing stuff, and you know, it's great to have Pat's input on stuff and his perspective on things because he's so experienced.
Hmm.
Left's a marvelous singer. He's got a very deep understanding of orchestration and how parts fit together. And he's you know he's actually got the focus and attention to want to spend a lot of time on some of the details that you know the rest of us might not go in so far into. And then, you know, one of the things that I do that maybe I'm not so used to doing with other things is I get involved in the lyrical content as well. So I'm not just playing the bass. There's like a lot more kind of conceptual stuff that we're kind of all feeding off together. So yeah, it's a real collaboration.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I know you mentioned yourself last, but I was gonna say, what are you most proud of in terms of your contributions to this album? Like, which songs, are you writing most of the lyrics to the songs? Are other guys writing the lyrics to the songs, or is it predominantly you?
No, it's mainly Left and myself.
Hmm.
The balance on this record was more Left than myself.
Okay.
So he had a lot more input on the lyrics, but that's great for me because that also comes from his confidence that has really grown. His English isn't his first language,
Hmm.
um, and I think when we did the first record, he was very reticent and he was really involving me in the lyrical content a lot more. And I've been really pleased when he's come back to me and said, "Look, I've got this, and these are the lyrics and that," and I think that's great. I don't really need to do much, you know. I think he's really great. He's really grown across the records. With that. But you know, I still get involved. Sometimes I might tweak a few things with him. Sometimes you know we'll go through the way the words scan together and make sure there's nothing because there's obvious things that non-native speakers sometimes just miss because
Hmm.
you know they're not doing it 24/7 like we are. So yeah, there's quite a lot of input in the detail sense as well. But generally, yeah, a lot of the lyrics are from him this time. For my own part, I did get slightly carried away a little bit on a few tracks. So on PTFP, I did do some fretless bass overdubs and
Uh-huh.
things that I really won't be able to play live. So I've got to think that through. But I was quite pleased when I did it. I put it in there thinking, oh, you know, he's going to tell me to take that off. You know, nobody's going to want that much of me. But actually, I really enjoyed it and it works really well. So there's a few upfront moments for me where I'm usually kind of a bit reluctant actually to do that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, as long as you're happy with it, right?
Yeah.
And so we're talking about Left a lot. I gotta say, I wasn't as familiar with him before listening to this album and a few of your other albums. And when he gets to those like higher registers, and I know it's been done before, I know it's been said before, but he really sounds like Chris Cornell. Like he attacks them in the same way. It's not like he doesn't sound like him all the time, but it's when he gets to those higher registers. I haven't heard anyone do it like Cornell until I heard Left do it, and I think that's unbelievable what he does on those highs, like screaming sections, and I think on I think it's Hello Mother is the track on the new album. I
Oh
think
yeah.
when he gets up, I'm like, is he back? Is Cornell back? Like he's unbelievable on there, man.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, inevitably any strong male vocalist is going to draw comparisons.
Yeah,
And you know, I mean, Jeff Buckley is the other one that gets mentioned. You know, people tell me, oh,
yeah,
he sounds a bit like Jeff Buckley. I mean, I don't know how much of it is him and how much of it is an influence in a way, because
yeah.
I know for a fact when we did the first record, he was always getting compared to David Sylvian.
Hmm.
And he actually said to me, like, I don't know David Sylvian. I've never heard David. I don't know what to say. You know, and I know that that's true. So
Yeah.
you know, when it comes to influences, you've got to make them your own. And I think that, you know, he makes things his own. That's what he does,
Oh,
really.
this is fully a compliment to him. Like
Yeah.
if he was the biggest Soundgarden fan in the world and he was able to sing like that, God bless him because there's not many people who can. Do you know what I mean? So
No.
like his
Yeah.
voice is stunning and it's great. And I encourage anyone who's not familiar with O.R.k stuff to check it out. Just, you know, for the music obviously, but to hear this as well. you
Yeah,
know?
he's a very, very accomplished singer, and I mean, we actually go quite a bit further back than most people might think because prior to O.R.k, we were in a band together called O.R.k,
Yes, I recall.
which
Yeah.
was like a sort of doom metal thing. But one of the things about O.R.k that is most of the time, especially on the second record where I got involved, was singing in no known language. It was all just something he came up with himself,
Hmm.
and kind of spontaneously improvised lyrics that in a way it didn't mean anything. It was just vocalization. But it was very powerful when we used to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I knew that when we started O.R.k, it was going to be something good, you know.
Yeah, and then you got involved with that's how you got involved with Carmelo, and then Pat from King Crimson came in as well too, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was the three of us first initially,
And
and
then Pat
we
came
wrote
in as the drummer.
stuff, and
Yeah.
then that came in. Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah. Well, we
oh sorry, you go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say we asked him, and initially he said, "Look, I haven't got time, but I
Hmm.
really like the stuff, And you're never sure. Sometimes if somebody says, "Well, I haven't got time," are they just kind of being polite and being vague so that you move on and find someone else? But no, he was genuinely interested. He just said, "I can't record for a few months. If you're okay to wait." So anyway, we waited for him, and then as I've discovered with Pat is that when you send him something, whatever comes back is an improvement in a way you never imagined. He's just very creative. So we're very glad we waited for him, even initially,
Yeah, I
and
would
we're
think
glad he's still sticking around. It's been great.
it might be worth waiting for a guy who's drumming for King Crimson. Yeah, it might be.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Just might be.
exactly.
Yeah. So Pat is also how you guys got hooked in with Adam Jones from Tool, right? Adam Jones designed the cover for Ramage Head and Screamnasium. Did he do the latest artwork or no?
No, he didn't do the latest one. I think he went on tour and ran out of time. So we asked him,
Mhm.
and he was initially quite positive, and he's been happy to do the other stuff. But this time around, I think he just didn't get to it. But Dennis Rodia, who did design the cover, was
Mhm.
involved with Ramage Head and Screamnasium. So Dennis sort of designed the package, if you like,
Okay.
uh, where Adam did the imagery. So this time round, and Dennis has done a cover for us before. He did the I'm Afraid of Americans cover that we had going on a few
Yes, I
years
heard,
ago.
which is a great cover, by the way. Love that cover.
Great. Well, that was kind of one of the reasons why we chose him because I thought that whether we know it or not, the tentacle figure and the
Yes.
octopus has been sort of it's been in the past records. It's kind of it keeps cropping up.
Yeah, Soul of
Um,
an Octopus, right? I was gonna ask you, like, what's the significance of the octopus?
well, I'm personally fascinated by them. I have been for years and years, and if you I'm going off on a bit of a tangent
That's
here,
okay.
but if you read up on them, they kind of share a root with humanity, with people. They're like an evolutionary branch that's
Mhm.
gone off somewhere completely
A
different.
bit
So they can
rogue.
do things. Yeah, but they've got personalities. People that have
Mhm.
studied them say they can do complex problem solving in the way that people can, and a lot of other animals can't. They have personalities. They do mischievous things. They kind of do things in a fun way as well. All kind of it's very easy to attribute them with being human, and really they're the closest thing to aliens that live on Earth. So they're fascinating creatures, and I read up a lot about them, and it's kind of interesting how the tentacle has a sort of it has a double meaning because there's always the monster aspect of it and the
Mhm.
unknown, and when we think about the album cover, the idea I was trying to get across to Dennis was, is the loudspeaker is broadcasting this propaganda that's corrupting everything, and
Mhm.
is the tentacle part of a monster that's broadcasting it, or is the tentacle part of a heroic creature that's going to pull the loudspeaker down? You can think of it either way.
Yeah. There's a duality to it. Yeah. It leaves it up to interpretation. It's depending on what
Exactly.
your mindset
Exactly.
is on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very creative. All right. So I also wanted to ask, you collaborated with Serge Tankian from System of a Down, right? How did he come
That's
into the
right. Yeah.
fold with you guys on Ramage Head? I know I'm going back a couple albums, but I was interested to see that. Like, and then the combination of his voice with Left's, was that the thought process there?
Yeah, so that actually came about via Bill Laswell. So Bill Laswell, you may know, is a long-time producer. He's done many, many, many bands over the years. And at the time, Lef and I were both working with Rare Noise Records, and Rare Noise Records put out a Lef solo album called Hypersomniac,
Hmm.
and Bill Laswell played bass on it and mixed it on some of it. And a couple of years later, he had apparently said to Lef, "I really think you would be a good pairing for Serge Tankian." So around the time we started work on Ramage Head, I said to Lef, why don't we just ask him, send him some of the tracks and see if he wants to get involved, because nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Exactly.
And he was super positive about it, and he came back, with Black Blooms as a choice for to work on, and then he worked on the lyrics with Lef, and yeah, it ended up being a proper collaboration. It wasn't like a guest spot, as in, it wasn't just a please can you sing this.
Hmm.
It was like it was a joint effort between us and Serge. So that was a fantastic thing, because it's what we've always had is people, sometimes in an elevated position. Serge Tankian has got such a reputation and
Yeah.
such a huge amount of followers that we've had people like him and like Adam Jones come on board and contribute to O.R.k,
Yeah, those are big
which I
names.
think,
Not that you're not,
yeah,
but like it's
sure.
like
But
they have a wider base to appeal to. It's
yeah,
like, oh, if you have them in your corner pushing it, that's an incredible thing for you guys.
well, you have to consider that they don't need to do it. Yeah. So they're
That
doing it
too.
because they see something in it and they like it. They're not doing it to advance themselves or for any other reason.
Absolutely.
So we've been really lucky with people like Elisa, who I wasn't so familiar with, but she's a megastar in Italy.
Hmm.
She didn't need to come and sing on a rock record. She loved the music. She did a fantastic job. Same thing with Serge. Same thing with Adam's involvement. He was really, really into it. So that's kind of gives us a lot of confidence, I think, to know that.
Absolutely. And it's reassuring to you for the integrity of what you're working on day in and day out with these albums. Um, Speaking of guest spots on the new album, John Wesley, your former bandmate in Porcupine Tree, is featured on Mask Becomes the Face. He was a touring guitarist in the band. What caused you to bring John in on that track? Had you two been in touch or played together since that original disbanding in 2010?
No, we hadn't played together. I had sort of kept in touch with him, and then as time went on and we both got busy, I kind of slipped off the radar with me a bit, and I didn't really hear from him. And of course, he's in America, and we weren't in each other's orbit, so I didn't hear from him for a while, and I didn't contact him. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
And it just so happens there's been a lot of reissue activity on some of the Porcupine Tree stuff.
Hmm.
And one of the things that happened was I ended up I haven't listened to most of the music for a long time. And I ended up listening to a track where Wes was playing, and actually it was Wes and Steve doing an in-store. I
Okay.
remember what it was. So this was a slightly different context. So I remember it very clearly. We went to do a performance in a record shop or something. It's one of these kind of promotional things. And it turned out the band couldn't do it. There wasn't room. It's only a tiny part of the store. So Steve and Wes got up and played a few songs. And I remember watching it, and Wes was playing. He wasn't doing what he did when we did the concerts, because in the concerts we had a very worked out set and it was very regimented and everything. This was a more spontaneous kind of performance. So he was a bit unleashed, if you like. He was
Okay. You
really,
let it
and I
fly
thought,
a little bit more.
yeah, and then when I heard it back, I remember thinking at the time, well, this is great. It was great watching them play the music, just kind of off the bat, without any kind of rehearsal or any real discussion.
Hmm.
And I heard this track again, or a couple of these tracks again. They popped up in the course of the reissue business. And at the same time, we're working on Mask Becomes the Face. And it had this sort of similar vibe to the very first O.R.k track, which was Pyre.
Hmm.
It's a similar tempo, it's a similar mood. So we were thinking about really differentiating it from the first track, from Pyre. And what would make it really different would be to have, you know, it may be really obvious, but what about a guitar solo? So there's that thought going on in my mind as well. And then Lev says to me, well, I think we should have a guitar solo. And it's not really something Carmelo wants to do. He doesn't want to do the kind of really big sort of epic guitar solo thing. He's quite happy with his stylistic kind of elements. So I said to him, why don't I ask Wes? You know, I haven't been in touch with him for a while, but I'm sure he would at least, he would at least give it some consideration, you know.
Mhm.
So I got in touch with Wes again, first time in a while, and I sent him the track, and then maybe a week later he did the job, you know, and he was really positive about it, really enthusiastic. And then of course, it's another situation where you get something back, and it's like, wow, I didn't expect that, you know. So he exceeded my expectations, you know.
Yeah. And that's great that you were able to reconnect too over that track. And hopefully that leads to further, at least a further collaboration maybe, or at least an upkeep of the relationship, you know? Um,
Oh yeah, sure. No, we'll keep in touch. I mean, I didn't have any fallout with Wes or anything like that. No. So
no,
it's the natural thing, you know. We both have families.
it's
Uh,
life.
it's it's life. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
getting your kind of career going, keeping it going as a musician's kind of almost it's a full-time job with that anyway. So, you know,
absolutely.
sometimes you don't if someone's not in your orbit, you don't always kind of you don't always connect with them, and it's nothing personal. It's just the way it is.
Just the way
But
things
no,
go.
Wes did a great job. I'm really happy he got involved. The other guys were super happy with it. You know, there's nothing. I think we offered him a really good context, and he delivered the goods. You know.
Yeah. One of his first tours with Porcupine Tree was for In Absentia, right? I think
Yeah, that's right.
he
Yeah.
came on for that. That was when you toured with Opeth. I actually saw you guys at Irving Plaza.
Oh right. Yeah, yeah.
I can't, I had to be 18 at the time. But I can't remember. I think you guys closed. I think Opeth opened and they were doing like a Damnation set, that kind of, like,
Okay.
low key album that they did. Um,
Yeah.
what memories do you have of that tour?
Yeah, I remember that too. I wasn't massively familiar with Opeth at the time. They were really a great band to tour with. They were really nice guys. They were super easy to get on with. There was no tension. It was a lot of fun. They were they played really well every night.
Mm,
I thought it was a really compatible co-bill. I mean, you got to be careful with co-bills because sometimes you get one kind of tribe doesn't like the other tribe, you know. But I
hmm.
think it was a compatible co-bill. I didn't really understand why we didn't do that again, really, because I thought it was quite successful. But I guess maybe the schedules didn't align. But yeah, it was a happy tour, I think.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite shows I've ever seen because I love both bands. So it was a home run for me.
Oh,
But
right.
I was sitting
Okay.
there, I think through your set, and I'm like, they haven't played Trains yet. I'm like, they're gonna play Trains, and then like it never happened during the main set. I'm like, there's no way they close with Trains, and then like that's how naive I was. You guys closed with Trains, so which was great.
The funny thing about that song was something that never, I don't know how it got the sort of cachet that it did, but it became a real favorite. And that's a good example of when something's, art in whatever form tends to take on a life of its own.
Hmm.
So Trains to me, it always felt like quite an accessible tune, but it was really an album track.
Yeah.
And I think we did it live when we first did it live. I'm not convinced it ever worked particularly. And then I
Mm.
think we persevered with it. Maybe we tried again, and it ended up being like this kind of encore number that everyone really liked. So it sort of took on a different character, it became something else.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
think
say
because of the reaction.
it's not like a traditional like closing song. It just became, like I think like a cult favorite. Like when I listen to that record, that's one of my favorite songs. That's like that's one that stuck with me because of what it's about and things like that. It's just the way it's written. I don't know. It's something you
Yeah,
can't
I
really
think there's
explain.
probably, yeah, exactly. You can't really explain it. I think there is a sort of nostalgic kind of feeling in it that's quite difficult to articulate.
Yeah.
And what sometimes a song does is it kind of gives expression to that feeling in a way that people can't do themselves. So
Hmm.
it definitely took on that. It had a warm reception. Eventually it was a definite crowd pleaser.
Well, absolutely. I was ecstatic to hear it finally. I was like, they finally played it. Um, while we're on In Absentia, that album kind of represented a little bit of a shift for you guys towards a more progressive metal. It was a bit more of a metal album. Um, I know Steven had guested and produced Blackwater Park with Opeth. prior to it being recorded. Do you think that was the main reason for the shift, or were there other factors too in that shift in that direction that you were going musically?
Well, I don't think it was particularly conscious, but it became the band got heavier. I mean, Steve obviously was very keen to take things more in that direction,
Hmm.
and away from sort of earlier psychedelic space rock sort of thing, which we kind of moved away from anyway as the material got more song based. And I suppose it happened. I mean, we were all, I remember on one tour sitting on the bus listening to Meshuggah and all
Okay.
really enjoying it. I mean, that's much heavier than Porcupine Tree ended up being, but
Yeah.
I think that some of that seeped into the way that was one of the things that we all liked. You know, we all liked the heavier end of Led Zeppelin as well. There was a sort of Venn diagram of
Of
stuff. So
course.
I was kind of fully behind that shift, really. I ended up playing bass differently in a way.
Mhm.
I went away from the fretless bass and I got into using a pick and doing different stuff. So I changed my approach to fit the music. And then, of course, the biggest change was Chris Maitland being replaced by Gavin Harrison.
Yeah.
So there was a sort of there's a definite A and B, you know, in the band's discography. I mean, Chris was very creative as a drummer. I think when you listen to the really early stuff, you can really hear how the live band brings it up
Mhm.
to another level if you compare it, especially with the studio stuff. And a big part of that was Chris's energy and his approach and his kind of sometimes quite sort of crazy playing in a way,
Hmm.
you know. But he really brought it to life. So yeah, I mean, yeah, definite shift in the heavy direction within Absentia. But yeah, well, I was fully behind it. I think, you know, we retained enough of the textural, ambient kind of things as well, to make it identifiably the same thing as well.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that's regardless of what style it is, whether it was, Stupid Dream, Light Bulb Sun, or the earlier stuff, or In Absentia, the tones and the sounds and the whatever you guys are doing musically has always sounded top notch. Like it always sounded, and that's what, kind of sets you guys apart, I think, in my own opinion. When I'm listening to a record, that's the kind of stuff that I listen to, and everything is so well thought out and cared for that it comes through in that it makes it such a pleasurable listening experience, you know? So
Well, I'm glad it still stands up years later, you know.
absolutely. For me, I love those albums. I still go back to them. So we're talking a bit about, how it affected your playing, going to picking and things like that. In terms of the bass lines you've either wrote or performed with Porcupine Tree, what was your favorite or the most fun to perform live?
Well, I'm not really one for favorites because you know, it shifts around, you know, especially as when you're playing live, there's a time sometimes where you want to play something in a different way, or you know,
Hmm.
your relationship to music changes because you're doing it night after night and you're thinking about it differently maybe every time you play it. So I can't really pick one moment. I mean, I used to really enjoy playing Halo. That was a great fun
Hmm.
bass line to play. It's kind of a bit discordant and a bit off the wall, but it fit
Yeah.
really well. I was really happy with that one. I used to really like, I mean, I Drive the Hearse, which is one of the later tracks that gave me a bit more room to play very melodically on the fretless. And that was at the time, that was something I hadn't done for a few records.
Hmm.
So I dragged out the fretless again for some of the incident tracks and some of the later stuff, you know, which I hadn't really done for a few years prior to that.
Hmm.
And then I used to like playing anaesthetised. The middle part was quite satisfying.
Yeah.
And I used to use a down-tuned bass, so I was playing like the bottom four strings of a fiver.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's exclusively tuned very low, and that was something that happened, you know, kind of by accident. Steve was getting into down tuning riffs, and I was getting into down tuning as well. And I just thought, you know, I need to get underneath what he's doing and what Wes is doing, to make it kind of work.
Hmm.
But that wasn't something that I planned. It was just like, oh yeah, I can do that, you know. But that was a satisfying tune to play, and I love that sort of low end you get. You know, that it's like those Spectre basses that I had with the down tune, the extra long neck.
Hmm.
Um, it's very, very defined in the low end. So you get it's like hitting a piano key. you get a very definite note. It's nice and clean, and it makes everything sit really nicely, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you for even though you don't play favorites, thank you for indulging me there. Um,
Okay, right, yeah.
all right, this one is the last Porcupine Tree question, but it's a bit more obscure. One of my favorite songs you guys ever did was "Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth Before It's Recycled," which is kind
Yeah.
of two songs in one, right? You've got the first part, which is like a youthful, kind of wistful, like love song, and then the second half is just an extended clip of Marshall Applewhite, the leader of Heaven's Gate, the cult,
Yeah.
and it's just him talking about how we have to evacuate Earth. This is it. We're done. We're leaving our human bodies and, going to the next realm. What was the reasoning behind throwing that clip on the at the end of that song?
Well, I didn't choose that sample.
I don't, well,
That's
yeah, as a group, I mean, what was was there a collective thought to it, or was that just Steven being Steven?
I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed on the older records when I've revisited them is that there's a lot of samples.
Hmm.
And I think maybe he collected samples and used them, and that was probably there's something a little bit, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, isn't there?
I
Like
was
you
gonna
say
say
in
it's
the
such a
song.
juxtaposition that I'm like, well, how does this work? Like, how is this working right now? But it
Well,
does.
I think that yeah, that works with art. When it works well, it's
Hmm.
very powerful because you're forcing someone to think in a different way. I mean, I'm going to sort of rewind into something completely different now. But when I worked with a bunch of Ukrainian musicians,
Hmm.
and the way it worked was they would send me vocal stuff, and I would put music to it. And it was a very successful collaboration because I was coming at it from a different direction and almost from a point of ignorance. I didn't understand the music, I didn't understand the language, I didn't know what they were singing about. And there was one particular song, they were really happy with everything, but one particular song they asked me about a few times, and I get the impression maybe they didn't like it, what I'd done. And I said, "Well, what's getting, why are you asking me these questions?" And they said, "Well, actually, it was a traditional song. It's often sung at weddings and it's meant to be joyous." And I'd put it in a kind of minor key, and I'd put this kind of, darker atmosphere to it. And it but I mean, of course, it's an interpretation, but I can see it kind of plays with your expectation.
Hmm.
So that ended up being quite a good piece actually. It's called Scripco, which means violin, and the lyrics when I finally got it out of them are to do with playing the violin at the wedding that you played, and everyone's happy because everyone's joyous, and we're all sitting around the violin and singing. And then you've got this kind of slightly darker element of the music that's
A
maybe
little
made me think, oh, the wedding isn't such a good idea after all.
I guess maybe understanding the language might be important, but if you did, you wouldn't have gotten that different, that beautiful juxtaposition of, the music versus the lyrics. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I understand your point now. Yes. Um, so to summarize, basically, do you feel that like, since you left Porcupine Tree, have you been able to express yourself more freely, explore more avenues musically? You've gotten involved in so many different projects. Like, how would you summarize that time with what you've done, with the pure volume of work that you've done?
Well, I haven't really planned anything because one thing has just generally led to another. So,
Hmm.
when I got involved with Rare Noise, for example, I did an album with another bass player as a project,
Hmm.
which was an experiment, and artistically it was very successful. And I think at the time it sold enough to justify us doing a second record, and we did some gigs, and that was something that gave me a bit of confidence. And I'd been working on other collaborations as well for a long time, and I think the longer you go on, your judgment gets better
Hmm.
and your confidence about making decisions gets better and your ability to work with people, of course, that gets better as well. So I think probably I had a very specific role in Porcupine Tree. I was the bass player
Hmm.
and I didn't get involved in the lyrics. I didn't get involved in certain aspects of it. I was very much, I did some of the co-writes, but I did as much as I could, but there was a limit to how much I could do really.
Yes.
Um, since I've been out of that environment, I've never felt constrained in the same way. So,
Hmm.
you know, and I probably didn't have the confidence early on, to have made the same sort of artistic statements. Whereas now I'm sort of really happy with the number of different things I'm getting involved in, and everything's new, everything's helping me grow, everything's interesting to me, and if not commercially, at least it's all artistically satisfying, you know.
As long as there's integrity to it and you're happy with it and it brings you joy, there's no reason not to do it, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So to bring it back to O.R.k, Firehose of Falsehoods comes out on March 21st. The first five singles are on all major streaming platforms currently. Colin, I just have one burning question left. What does the band's name mean?
Well, yeah, I don't know if there's a sensible answer to that. It's it was to do with Carmelo and Left drinking too much one evening and having this idea that we should call the band Orca, which is Italian for killer whale.
Hmm.
Uh, and I said, you can't do that, you know. I mean, like Orca, it doesn't mean anything. There's a film, like some nature documentary about killer whales called Orca. No one's going to be, going to remember that or take it up. But it does describe the music in a way. It's kind of graceful at times. It's
Hmm.
beautiful, and there's a sort of element of danger at times as well, you know. So I kind of agreed with the sort of description. But then he said, well, what if we pick an acronym, O.R.k. And I didn't really give it too much thought. And then, of course, we're sort of stuck with it. But we've had some fun with it as well because every now and again people will write in, and say, "What does it mean? Who are the Order of Random Knights?" Or something like that. Who is the Octopus Removal Cult? Something silly
It
that
leaves
we
it
generally
open to
kind of laugh
interpretation.
at. Yeah, I'd say it's another thing you can interpret yourself.
Yeah. So like many of the great ideas throughout history, it came from a night of drinking. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know.
Exactly, exactly.
All right, Colin, thank you so much for doing this. Firehose of Falsehoods is out on March 21st through Kscope Music. Like I said, the first five singles are on all major streaming platforms currently. Thank you for doing this with me. Thank you for indulging all of my questions, and best of luck with everything moving forward, Colin. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks very much, Ed.
You got
Take
it.
care.
You too.